It was one of those July afternoons where the heat seemed to radiate off the cobblestones in waves. Outside Buckingham Palace, tourists were stacked shoulder to shoulder behind the iron barriers. Phones were raised, water bottles were emptied, children whined, and adults shaded their eyes. At the edge of it all, unmoving, stood Corporal Elijah Ward, 31 years old, third-generation soldier, now standing guard in his bright red ceremonial uniform and tall black bearskin hat. He hadn't moved in 4 hours. He wouldn't move for 2 more. Not unless he had to. To most people, guards like Ward were just that: statues, props for selfies, TikTok challenges, background material. But inside that stillness was a man whose silence was earned. Elijah had served in NATO deployments across Eastern Europe. His record was clean. His hands, not so much. There were nights he still woke up reaching for a rifle that wasn't there. Yet here he was, holding a different kind of line. One built not on combat, but on composure. And that, in some ways, was harder. It started as a loud voice, somewhere deep in the crowd. A slur, then laughter. At first, it was just background noise, someone trying to impress his friends. But then Elijah caught a glimpse. Mid-30s, bulky, with a sweat-soaked shirt stretched tight over his belly, a Union Jack bandana on his forehead, and a silver can of cider in hand. Martin Shaw, local, drunk, and dangerously bored. "Oi, look at this one. Bet he's not even breathing under that hat." His friends laughed behind him, recording already. Martin stepped closer to the barrier. Too close. Elijah remained motionless. "You ever blink, mate? Or do they replace your batteries at night?" No reaction. "Come on, say something. I dare you." Nothing. That's when Martin grabbed the metal barrier, leaned over slightly, and slurred, "I bet if I grab that fancy stick of yours, you'll finally say hi." Elijah's grip tightened imperceptibly. He'd been trained for provocation. He'd stood through insults, mockery, even gum stuck to his boots. But no one touched the rifle. Tourists began backing away slightly. A woman pulled her son closer. An older man whispered, "Leave him be." But Martin wasn't hearing it. Or didn't care. He tossed the empty can behind him with a clang and staggered forward, his hand reaching past the barrier. "Let's see if this toy's real." He grabbed the barrel of Elijah's rifle. 0.0 seconds. The touch. Fingers on cold black metal. 0.8 seconds. Elijah's eyes shift for the first time in hours. Lock on target. 1.2 seconds. Left boot rotates 45 degrees. Rifle chamber pivots upward. 2.0 seconds. Elijah lunges forward, not violently, not recklessly, but with a movement honed by years of tactical drills. The rifle dislodges from Martin's grip and is instantly leveled downward in a defensive stance. 3.0 seconds. Elijah's voice cracks through the courtyard like thunder. "Stand back now." The crowd gasps. Phones rise. Martin stumbles backward, now fully sober. Gasps filled the courtyard. For the first time in hours, Corporal Elijah Ward had moved, and not subtly. The rifle was now in a low, ready defensive stance, his voice echoing like a gunshot. "Stand back now." The drunk man, Martin Shaw, stumbled back 2 steps, hands raised, shocked sober by the force behind the words. His friends stopped laughing. Tourists froze, phones recording in a silence that felt like church. Even the guards across the square had subtly shifted, watching, assessing. But Martin wasn't done. Humiliated, flustered, his face flushed red with alcohol and adrenaline, he pointed a trembling finger at the guard. "You think you're better than me? You can't touch me. You're not even allowed to move unless the Queen says so, innit?" No answer. Martin took that as weakness. He advanced again, this time not toward the rifle, but toward the man, shouting, chest puffed, "I pay your bloody salary." His arm extended in the universal sign of "Fight me," finger now inches from Elijah's face. Elijah Ward moved again, not with rage, not with hesitation, but with the reflexive precision of someone trained to neutralize threats under pressure. His left foot stepped forward into a combat stance. His free hand raised palm out between himself and the man's advancing arm. His voice dropped low, but firm. "This is your final warning." The tone wasn't ceremonial. It wasn't theatrical. It was military. Behind Martin, a security guard appeared, rushing up the perimeter. Another joined from the right. But Elijah didn't flinch. He didn't look away. Not until he was sure Martin understood. Martin lunged. Whether it was instinct or intoxication, his hand reached for Elijah's arm, an act that sealed the moment. In one fluid move, Elijah sidestepped, twisted Martin's wrist inward, and brought him to his knees with a textbook pressure lock. The crowd gasped. Children hid behind parents. Tourists shouted. Phones captured every second. Martin howled in pain. 2 palace security officers closed in and cuffed him on the spot. As Martin was dragged away, spitting curses, Elijah remained still. Rifle once again vertical, boots locked, expression unreadable. A small child whispered, "Is he okay?" A woman nearby said softly, "He's not the one who got hurt." The crowd erupted, not in panic, but in applause. It wasn't loud. It was slow, respectful, like a salute. Elijah didn't acknowledge it. He just stood, restoring his position, face blank, but jaw tight. By evening, the video had over 3 million views, uploaded from every angle, edited with dramatic music, analyzed on podcasts, shared by veterans' pages. British Guard disarms, drunk tourist in seconds. This is what controlled power looks like. Discipline over violence, the Guard's masterclass. Social media exploded in comments. "That man is a wall." He didn't punch. He didn't yell. He controlled everything. We need more people like him in positions of power. And in between the hashtags and viral edits, people whispered something more powerful. "That's what honor looks like." 2 days later, Corporal Ward sat in a formal briefing room inside Wellington Barracks. Across the table sat Captain Lydia Grant, a decorated officer known for her no-nonsense tone. "You broke ceremonial stillness. Twice," she said, eyes on a printed report. "Yes, ma'am." "You addressed a civilian verbally and physically engaged him." "Yes, ma'am." A pause. "Do you regret your actions?" Elijah met her gaze. No, ma'am. Grant folded the file. Neither do we. Later that day, the palace released a rare public statement. The actions of Corporal Elijah Ward were in accordance with updated defensive protocol. His restraint and professionalism reflect the values of the Royal Guard and the nation it serves. No suspension, no reprimand, only a commendation. That night, Elijah sat in his flat, reading a letter delivered by hand. No return address. Inside, a single sentence. My son watched you that day. He asked what a real man looks like. I pointed to the screen. Elijah read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it beside his medals. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when Martin Shaw stood before the magistrate. Clean shirt, fresh haircut, but still defiant. Video footage had gone viral in every direction. The prosecution barely had to present a case. The evidence was already etched into the internet. Assault on military personnel, public intoxication, disorderly conduct, resisting removal. His defense? He shouldn't have touched me. He's just a guard. The judge stared at him for a moment, then simply replied, and yet he showed more self-control in 3 seconds than you have in your entire adult life. Martin was fined, sentenced to 120 hours of community service, and banned from entering Westminster for 2 years. But the bigger punishment wasn't legal. It was cultural. He became a meme. The man who tried to grab a soldier's rifle and got folded. Even his own mates stopped defending him online. Meanwhile, Elijah Ward's calm presence had become a symbol, one now printed on shirts, featured in documentaries, and discussed in schools. 3 weeks later, Elijah returned to his regular rotation at Buckingham Palace. Same uniform, same heat, same silence. But something had changed. This time, tourists approached more respectfully. Children waved with awe instead of giggles. A father pointed and said, "That's him. That's the one from the video." Elijah didn't acknowledge them, but in the tightness of his grip and the quiet lift of his chin, there was pride. Not pride in the attention, pride in the restraint. One afternoon, after rotation, Elijah was summoned to the barracks office. There stood Major Richard Templeton, commander of Ceremonial Division. Without sitting, he held out a red leather box. Inside, a folded commendation, and a second box containing a medal. Not for action in battle, the major said, but for protecting the dignity of this uniform when it mattered most. Elijah saluted, not as a formality, but as a thank you. Weeks later, Elijah was invited to speak at a secondary school assembly in South London. He almost refused. He wasn't a public speaker. He didn't crave the spotlight. But when he stepped on stage in full uniform, the room went silent. Teenagers, usually the toughest crowd, leaned in. He didn't talk about the viral moment. He didn't name names. He said this: "You'll be provoked in life, laughed at, challenged. What you do in those moments, when no one expects you to stay calm, that's who you really are." The gymnasium stayed quiet, then erupted in applause. But Elijah didn't stay for photos. He just nodded and left quietly through the side door. One day, Standing at post again in full silence, Elijah noticed a boy, 10, maybe 11, standing with his mum behind the ropes. The boy was staring, wide-eyed, clutching a small toy rifle. When their eyes met, the boy whispered something barely audible. "I want to be strong like you." Elijah didn't nod. He didn't smile, but he blinked. Once. And the boy smiled, as if the queen herself had waved. Strength isn't loud. It isn't reckless. It doesn't need to hit to be felt. Real strength is standing still when it would be easier to explode. It's discipline when you're disrespected. It's protecting your principles, not just your pride. Corporal Elijah Ward didn't raise his voice. He didn't lash out. He didn't give them the fight they wanted. He gave them something far more powerful. A lesson